Ebusuafo na etiefo ni de kwan so me ma obi bia akwa abaiba channel so an me daily update TV. Ebusuan me pacho ya papa Kwesi Pratt e pia babonten e de nsem bia betudwa na me pacho we react to somehow a banter existed between the OSP and the Attorney General's office. Na me pacho ne kasemu no na o kire say obien hu a obetimi a oppose and answer wa prevent the fight against corruption. Na e warn na all sending across to the NPP fraternity. I o kire say in as much as a per se a fighter against corruption and so shena yanko at the expense of obinso right. Inti ebusuya wakan sempa wakan sema watches or send one in Akroma NP before catch him said moya dena the fight against corruption allegedly or more malutu the state funds na mra any omudi ni die e wo se mra ni omudi pa inti mra ni omubedi pa till say mra ni yehu se mra ni omadi na obie ni ho a the fight against corruption at this time around, the Attorney General and said the President of the Republic of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama, now buying all fight no be no bit my preventive crime.
So yes, we have to fight corruption. Yes, those who have allegedly stolen money and so on, we should retrieve them, but not at the expense of anybody's liberty and rights. And this point must be made as strongly as possible. Okay? Look, when I gave the Newz Memorial Lectures, I predicted, and I'm sure that Sana, you were there, and Suhini, I suspect you were there. I boldly predicted at the time that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama would become the next president. That he will be elected president. Because you could feel, you knew what was happening. You looked at the prices of food. It had gone up by 500% and so on. You could tell that change was imminent and so on. Today, there are things that we can still feel and tell. And that is this poison, this poison which has been sown in the system. The government only does well if it catches NPP people and throws them in jail. Will come back to cause a lot of havoc if it's not managed well. I've spoken to many lawyers, many distinguished lawyers, senior lawyers and so on. In fact, one of them is Alhaji Inu Safuseni, who testified that Dominic Ayini is a fantastic lawyer, that he's very learned, he's a principled man, and so on. So, how come that public expectation is not being met? Because it simply cannot be met. You understand? So, finally, let me say that as for the fight against corruption, nobody can be against it. Nobody can be against it. The struggle to retrieve whatever may have been stolen, nobody can be against it. The struggle to establish some sanity in public administration, nobody can be against it. But there are real constraints which we need to appreciate. But what does the OSP do? He writes a letter to the Chief of Staff. Clearly, from the interpretation of Article 88, 1 to 6, his office ought to be working under the direction of the AG. But he bypasses the AG and writes to the Chief of Staff, asking for some assistance to extradite Mr. Foriata. The Chief of Staff then writes to the AG. The AG then writes to the Office of Special Prosecutor and say, give me the document you have in its current state. Add 2 investigators, let them come to my office and let's start on the process. OSP says, I haven't finished the investigations. Ally? OSP says, we haven't finished the investigations. Meanwhile, the AG is asking for the docket as it is at the time of the request. He can't go. this is the problem we have created with this contraption, you know, that we have put together and so on. But you see, I want to make a point that I find most important. You see all the newspapers lying in front of us, and then you listen to public commentary, so, and it is obvious immediately that something is wrong. All those people who are being investigated and whose cases are being prepared for prosecution, none of them can be referred to as a thief or a corrupt person. They are not. Wontumi is not a thief. Hanan is not a thief. Mustafa Hamid is not a thief, and so on. The only authority who can declare them as thieves or corrupt persons is the judiciary. And there has been no judicial process leading to a determination that these allegations against them are true and therefore they are corrupt. You understand what I'm saying? In fact, under normal circumstances, most of our commentary would amount to contempt of court because they are highly prejudicial. You understand? Highly prejudicial. Yes, they are accused persons, allegations have been made against them and so on, but ultimate verdict lies with the courts. Now, the other thing which is important in this conversation is simply the fact that our system of justice is biased in favor of the elite, of the bourgeoisie. Our system of justice is deliberately class biased. And that is why those who end up in prison very, very quickly when they are accused are the shoemakers, the trotro drivers, those who steal buckets of cassava, and those who steal small goat and fowl and so on. They end up in prison very fast. Within 1 week, matter finished, the man is in prison. It is because of the class bias of our system. Master, if you have somebody who has sufficient resources, who is able to employ the best lawyers, who probably is a lodge member with a judge and so on, their cases are never settled in time. 10 years you are still in court. Any small thing, they make reference to Supreme Court, they are going for interpretation of the Constitution. That alone is 3 months, sometimes 1 year, and so on. So, important rich people, those, the bourgeois class and so on, you hardly win cases against them. And check the history. Master, check the history. If you are a carpenter, especially a self-employed carpenter who has not had a job for 6 months, go and steal a fowl and see. Sharp, sharp, you won't go to prison one time. But if you are a big-time lawyer with a few millions in your account, and you happen to be a member of a certain lodge, where a prominent chief has a post in that lodge and so on, how can you go to prison? How can you be convicted?
You go and negotiate.
Sometimes you don't even negotiate. They forgive your sins and then you go home and sleep. So this class bias in our system is something that perhaps one day with a properly oriented government and so on, we should deal with. The class bias of our judicial architecture is something that perhaps we need to deal with and so on. Now, Sohini, this campaign against corruption, Aura, featured so prominently in the NDC campaign. And I remember, Sohini, maybe, oh, sorry. Sohini.
Next time I'm here.
Look, I remember very clearly, very, very clearly, that I had occasion to speak to the NDC publicly, you know. And I told the NDC and its leaders that the pitch of that anti-corruption campaign was problematic. It was problematic. Why was it problematic? It was problematic because at the time, all of us had made statements suspecting that the judiciary had been packed, all the way from the High Court to the Supreme Court. You understand? Now, in a situation where the judiciary has allegedly been packed, how are you going to fulfill that promise you were making to everybody about ORA and so on? It was impossible. You understand? Now, if you add the suspicion that the judiciary had been packed to the class bias of the whole architecture, you have a double barrel problem to deal with. You understand? And so on. And then history also should have taught us important lessons. There's a history. I mean, cases which governments put before courts, and not just the NDC, NPP, and so on, lasted 10 years. We could not find a solution to the cases and so on. Now, what the NDC managed to do is what is biting the NDC today. And only 2 days ago, I spoke on this Pan-African platform, and I told stories about people that I had had conversations with, you know. I had a conversation with a lawyer and a university lecturer. And one of them actually told me that, look, John Mahama, if he comes to power for 4 years, he doesn't repair one road, repair, not construct, repair one road. If he doesn't fight the deterioration of the city, if he doesn't expand employment, if he doesn't do anything, and he just catches these NPP people who he describes as thieves and locks them up and throws the key away, he will be his hero forever. Even a lawyer told me that his only expectation is that NPP looters, that's what he said, should be arrested, prosecuted, and locked up. That's his only expectation. They don't care about the fact that over the last 3 years, we have lost 50% of our cocoa production. It doesn't matter to them. Now, these are lawyers and university lecturers. So can you imagine what party food soldiers are thinking and saying? And in fact, this university lecturer I told is not even a member of the NDC. Indeed, when I got to know him, he was an MPP loyalist. This is how they are thinking. This is where we have gotten to, and it is a dangerous place to be. Because what you're doing now is that we are baiting for blood. We have become a mob, baiting for blood. We want to see blood. We want to see them arrested. We want to see them thrown in prison. No matter how you do it, just throw them into prison and satisfy us. Look, whether you like it or not, John Mahama assumed office. Somehow, and I don't know how it was done, the city is now exchanging at 10 cedis to $1. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. Who cares? We want them in jail. You say CD is 10 cedis to $1. You haven't jailed the people who are coming to us and saying CD is 10 cedis to $1. We don't care. He has launched the big push. You understand?
I'm not even talking about it.
The road all the way from Takoradi to Cape Coast is being dualized. He's talking about big, big projects. Who cares? Nobody cares. They don't mind. All they want is to see NPP leaders in jail. Look at the rate of inflation. the rate of inflation has fallen drastically. Who cares? They don't care. You are wasting their time by telling them about inflation. Catch them and put them in prison. You see, so the NDC itself has created a problem for itself. Because if the focus had not been on aura, solely on aura, or so largely on aura, by now, John Mahama's administration will be applauded all over the place. Nobody wants to applaud John Mahama's administration. There are two things that the public cares about. And indeed, if you look at opinion polls and so on, and I have quite a few interesting ones which have not been made public, very serious ones, reliable ones, it has not been made public. One day, if you insist, I'll show it to you. Why? The popularity of the government is going down. Okay? Why is it going down? Two things. Galamsey and the fight against corruption. Only two things. How would anybody get into government and make his own life and future and present and so on dependent on two items? When there's so much to be done in every sector, crucial things to be done in every sector and so on. Okay? So, to a very large extent, this is a problem that the NDC brought upon its head. Understand? When I made the statements that I referred to at the Atamil's Memorial Lecture, wow, the next day, you should see the messages I got. You should see the messages I got. And I laughed. Because I knew that it would not take too long for what I was saying then to become manifest. And it is becoming manifest now. Now, you can pave our roads with gold. And make zebra crossings with diamonds and so on. They don't care. They want them arrested. They want them jailed and so on.
Abusia me pacho me do bibia se wanyamre na wa benye video ni bin so ahwe ye papa Kwesi Pratt we pia ba bonten de nsem bebre abetudwa ne kasan ye nyina ye nya biatie na I side with him and I agree with him. I mean 100%. Yes, in as much as we are fighting against corruption, it shouldn't be at the expense of obi say you infringe on obi so right. No, shena yanya sakra. But in as much as you consider the human rights aspect, of everything I hear, say nipa no so no say well, because as it stands now, nobody has been declared say or you're guilty of the crimes and as allegations now being leveled against Sankophone, and of which we know say the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana gives room and I say a mass up 2 minutes. I decide 2 minutes the judiciary so mono bet me I declare Obi as say nipani or you're guilty of the crime committed and I say nipano enye guilty. Tebusia mene Kwesi Pratt papa Kwesi Pratt ya adwen papa mene papa Kwesi Pratt ya adwen bebre na me pacho obo kwan so ye de nkomo ni besi amesel so do comment be share comment section onum e be gene akenkan insem bia Kwesi Pratt kan so one na anya adwen a the best way obetima be ehun ni say o de beto comment section no e ma rem say dem kan na han me daily update TV Ebusia me patch us and no first time about channel so as unya a video no share so we need you nkwada subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and share our videos. My love is so enye bi enti nyakopo nhira obi bia na onye obi bia kese. E patch ye de nkomo ni ebesia me de obi bia se.